Anachari Yamunatira Anachari Yamunatira Anachari Yamunatira Madhava Kundariyari Master, do we have the book, or do I need to read it from here?
So we never bought it. Yes, from here.
In the Bible, Canto 12. What's the chapter and verse number again? Canto 12, chapter 3, the age of deterioration, and which means Kali Yuga, of course. Text 51. Kalya dosha nide rajan Kalya dosha nide rajan asti eko mahan guna asti eko mahan guna kirtanat deva krishnasya kirtanadeva krishnasya mukta sangha param vrajet mukta sangha param vrajet kalya doshanide rajan Asrihe kumahan guna Kirtanadeva krishnasya mukta sangha param vrajet kalya doshanide rajan Asrihe kumahan guna Kirtanadeva krishnasya mukta sangha param vrajet
Kalya doshanide rajan asti yako mahan guna Kirtanadeva krishnasya mukta sangha param vrajet
Kalya doshanide rajan asti guna
Kirtanadeva krishnasya
mukta sangha param vrajet
Kalya doshanide
rajan asti yako mahan guna
Kirtanadeva krishnasya
mukta sangha param vrajet Kalya doshanide rajan asti yako mahan guna Kirtanadeva krishnasya mukta sangha param vrajet
Kalya in the age of Kali doshanide
in
the ocean of faults
rajan
okay asti
there is
he
certainly
eka
one
Mahan,
Mahan,
very great.
very great.
Guna,
Guna,
good quality.
good quality.
Kirtana,
Kirtana,
by chanting.
by chanting.
Eva,
Eva,
certainly.
certainly.
Krishnasya,
Krishnasya,
of the holy name of Krishna.
or the holy name of Krishna.
Mukta Sangha,
Mukta Sangha,
liberated from material bondage.
liberated from material bondage. Param,
To the transcendental spiritual
to the
kingdom.
transcendental spiritual kingdom.
Raje,
Vrajet,
one can go.
one can go.
So purport.
Mhm.
So purport, my dear king, although Kali Yuga is an ocean, not so translation. My dear king, although Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults, there is still one good quality about this age. Simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, one can become free from material bondage and be promoted to the transcendental kingdom. Let's repeat. My dear king,
My dear king,
although Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults,
although Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults,
there is still one good quality about this age.
there is still one good quality about this age.
Simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra,
Simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra,
one can become free from material bondage
one can become free from material bondage
and be promoted to the transcendental kingdom.
and be promoted to the transcendental kingdom.
Quote, after mentioning the innumerable faults of this age of Kali, Shukadev Goswami now mentions its one brilliant aspect. Just as one powerful king can kill innumerable thieves, one brilliant spiritual quality can destroy all the contamination of this age. It is impossible to overestimate the importance of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, especially in this fallen age. Om Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Sari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare. So I thought it was another verse we're going to be speaking from.
It's two verses, one of them.
Huh?
Two verses, and this one is the first one.
Or is it? I thought you'd given me a choice of three verses.
Yeah, you've chosen this one.
But it's okay.
That's
It was verse 3.
right.
It's okay. They're very similar. So there's another similar verse to this, which is explaining that what was achievable in previous ages through, so in Satya Yuga, the method of self-realization was what? Meditation. And people had a long lifespan, so they could do those things. And the atmosphere wasn't so disturbed. If you try to find somewhere peaceful to do meditation nowadays, then it's not so possible, is it? There's always some kind of disturbance. And I've often, just like now, we're trying to meditate on the class and phones are going off. Anybody else got a phone they want to switch off just now? So this is the situation. Even in Vrindavan, everybody's got a phone. You know, they've hardly got 2 paisa to rub together, but they've got a phone. Everyone's got a phone. And if you can't afford the phone, they'll get something that looks like a phone. We've seen that also, some little thing with some flashing lights, and they're standing there pretending they're talking because it's some kind of, what do you call it, status symbol nowadays. A little plastic thing with a printed circuit board, status symbol. Even in the Holy Dam, you see Kali Yuga. So, In the previous age, the atmosphere was much more conducive for that. It wasn't so surcharged with many people just simply trying to utilize the planet for their own ends, for sense gratification. So there has to be some yajna at a different age. If one doesn't perform yajna, then, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, that grains are produced from rains and rains comes from yajna. So if there's no yajna going on, then there won't even be grass growing, there won't even be any kind of vegetation. Sometimes when we're out on Harinam or we're out on book distribution or we're raising funds, people say, "Oh, you guys are parasites." But actually, no, we're the only ones who's giving anything. By doing yajna, we're giving something, and therefore there's still auspiciousness. Prabhupada said that normally, at this time in Kali Yuga, and due to all the sinful activities which is going on, then the sinful reactions would be much worse for the people in general, for the mass of people. But because of the chanting of the holy name, because of the Sankirtan Yajna, it's holding back the tide of Kali. So this chanting of Hare Krishna is so powerful, the Lord's holy name is so powerful, not different from the Lord. So it's holding back Kali Yuga. So the lifespan people had in Satya Yuga was much greater, therefore people, and the atmosphere was much more conducive. Therefore the process of mystic yoga and self-realization, going to a secluded place, etc. People performed these things for tens of thousands of years, and they had the ability to do that, and the atmosphere was conducive, etc. But as it goes on to the next age, then lifespan gets less, and then the next age less, and then finally Kali Yuga, where practically nobody lives beyond 100, and if they do, they get a letter from the Queen, at least if you're in the UK. She'll have to give herself a letter soon as well, I think. So it's just one of these things that in Kali Yuga, if you live till you're 100, you're considered to be old, although it says in the Bhagavatam that if you live to the age of 20, you'll be considered an old man or old woman in due course of time, because things become so degraded, and sense gratification is the only goal. So normally Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, these things are their religiosity. Dharma, Artha, economic development, Kama, sense gratification, Moksha, liberation. This is the kind of general Vedic thing. But as time goes on, and the ages go on, and Kali Yuga, as that goes on, then people are not interested in Moksha, they don't believe in it. They only believe in what they can see in front of their eyes, because their senses are so dull, and their mind is so contaminated, they can't see beyond simply the sense object which they want. So they become blind to any hint of spiritual realization, which is very unfortunate. And therefore, they're not interested in moksha. Dharma, religiosity, they think is simply a waste of time. It's an obstacle, get out of the way. And even Artha, economic development, they don't even want to work. They just want sense gratification. So this is the degradation of human society, where people are becoming no more than animals. And in fact, in many cases, worse than animals. But you see nowadays that people would rather give to an animal charity than humans, because they don't trust humans. They've got no faith in humanity. And they actually think that the animals are a more worthy cause. So such is the disgrace that people have made of the human society. And this can be counteracted. Sorry if I'm speaking a bit strongly, but this can be counteracted. And it's not as this verse mentions here, that Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults. We can simply easily see the faults in everybody. We can't see our own faults. That's our greatest fault. Once I had the task of trying to help someone realize that their level of spiritual advancement wasn't that they were the most advanced person in the temple because they could see everyone's faults. They thought, yeah, I'm more embarrassed than everybody. Everyone should listen to me because I can see where everyone's going wrong. And then so I simply had to point out that actually a devotee sees where everybody's going right. He doesn't see the faults. He sees the devotion in person. What does it say? If you spot it, you've got it. So if you see the fault in someone, then it may well mean that you've got it yourself. If you see the good in someone, that cultivates the good in you. So even if you're selfish, then it's actually in your own interest to actually see the good in people. And this takes some practice because in Kali Yuga it's natural to see the faults in people. We're all fault finders, and it doesn't mean that we're actually very intelligent because we can see the faults in people. We may be intelligent, but it means we're misusing our intelligence. So we have to cultivate seeing the good in others. So as devotees, certainly this helps us in cultivating good relationships with the devotees who we share our life with day in, day out. And for those who are living outside the temple also, they can still try to do that. And you see that Prabhupada's example was that he would find some good, even in the most unusual circumstance, he would find good in people. And this is the nature of the devotee, that they'll see one good thing because they always have hope and they're always looking for an opportunity to give that person some benefit in their life. And there's no better way to benefit people than the chanting of the holy name. So in the next stage, Treta Yuga, then what was the method of self-realization in Treta Yuga? Okay. Brenda again?
Sacrifices.
Yeah, so they did very opulent and costly sacrifices. So nowadays, we cannot afford like that. They had so much opulence because of all the yagas they were doing, then the natural resources were there. There was no scarcity because they were working in harmony with nature. When we work in harmony with nature, then everything goes nicely. But when we try to lord over nature, then we may think for some time that we're in control, but what happens is we realize that we are actually in ignorance of nature's laws and it comes back to bite us. Just like sometimes they might decide that they're going to annihilate certain species, make them extinct, and then realize, oh, we shouldn't have done that, they were part of the ecosystem. So they try to play God, but in ignorance we cannot do such a thing. It's just foolishness and creates havoc. So anyway, the opulent sacrifices which were performed in those days, because they were doing sacrifices, then the gifts of nature were in abundance. And they also had a prolonged lifespan. But nowadays, we cannot engage in these sacrifices because we don't have the wealth, we don't have the time, we don't have the expertise, we don't have the purity. So back in those days, the Brahmins were using golden utensils for doing yajnas, and then at the end of the yajna, they weren't stashing them and then going back to their house and then like melting it down and getting some money for it. They weren't doing something like that. They were just distributing them freely to everybody. So in this way, this was the social system, that they're planting fruit trees everywhere, digging wells, giving in charity. These things were going on and everybody was looked after. And in fact, even when the administrative classes were giving wages to the worker classes, they weren't paid as much, but they had no running costs. They weren't being manipulated and monopolised for electricity, gas, this tax, that tax, the next tax. Everything was already taken off. They were given enough to live. Because if you give them too much, what happens? If you give a Sudra too much money, what do they do with it?
Spend it
On
intoxication.
intoxication. Spend it on intoxication. That's what happens. We see that people just want to get intoxicated, and then when they're intoxicated, they don't want to work. So the governments there were very smart. They could understand that if people are intelligent enough to know what to do with their wealth, then just look after them and don't give them things which are going to put them in harm's way. So in this way they were considering the well-being of the citizens. But nowadays people are just so interested in votes that they don't care about the well-being. It's just about as long as they get votes, as long as they get the power, and they get something for themselves. So selfishness is the order of day. And then in the Dwapara Yuga, the method of self-realization was
Deity worship.
deity worship, yeah. And that deity worship also was very opulent, and once again the lifespan was longer. And the opulence, the natural opulence which people had then, we don't have now. So in Kali Yuga we neither have the long duration of life nor abundance of natural gifts, nor do we have the peaceful state of mind. What is the description of Kali Yuga? Anyone remember that verse? Some qualities of Kali Yuga, typical Kali Yuga specimen.
It was short-lived,
Lazy,
and above all always disturbed.
lazy and misguided, and above all, always disturbed. So this is the description of Kali Yuga, the age of quarrel and hypocrisy. So we see that if someone said, okay, now for the next 100,000 years I want you to go to the Himalayas and meditate, you think, that'll take me about 1,000 lifetimes. Not practical, not possible. Or we want you to perform some great yoga, it will take about 25 years to gather all the ingredients together, and then you can perform the yoga. And how much determination would we have to even do that? Or opulent temple worship, first we'd have to build a suitable temple, which would take more than a lifetime. And who's interested, we can hardly even maintain a simple little barn here, converted barn. That's difficult to maintain, what to speak of some other things. So simply Harinam, Harinam, Harinam eva kevalam, kalona stjeva, nistjeva, nistjeva gatiranyata. So in this age of Kali, there's no other way but the chanting of the holy name. So 3 times this is mentioned, Nasteva, Nasteva, Nasteva. And this is not some kind of sectarian thing by saying not this, not that, but what it is saying is that the previous methods of self-realization in Satya Yuga, Treta and Dwapara Yuga, Nasteva, 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 these are not applicable in Kali Yuga. And Harinam, Harinam, Harinam eva kevalam. So when something in Vedic literature is mentioned 3 times, it means that don't even think that there's something beyond this. You're wasting your time to think that there's something beyond this. It's simply, you want to go around in circles and you'll come back to this conclusion. So, and it's interesting that it says that although Kali Yuga is a notion of faults, it is wonderful that simply by chanting the holy name of Lord one is transferred to the kingdom of God, or the transcendental Lord. So, in some Shastras it's mentioned that Kali Yuga, although externally it appears to be the most degraded age, there's so much horrible ugra karma activities going on, actually it's the most blessed age. It's the most conducive age because it's such a short lifetime, 100 years max. And nowadays, many people, they don't live past 50 or 60. So in some places, of course, they say the life expectancy is going up. So anyway, even if it goes up, it's not going to go up to like 150, 200 or something like that. And if it did, say if they said, okay, now you can live to your 150, be thinking, do I want to? Look at the state of someone when they get to 90, they're finding diseases there that because they're able to prolong life in some way, they're finding diseases now that they weren't coming across before because people were dying younger. So in this way, they're hoping they can find some eternal life. So that's natural, but they'll never find eternal life within the body because that is destined to be vanquished. And this is the first thing that Krishna says to Arjuna. Asochanam vasochas tvam pragyavadam shibashase gatasana gatasana chanana shuchanti panditaha. That you're, by speaking loud words, you're mourning for that which is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. So neither do the wise lament for the body, the loss of the body, or are they overjoyed for obtaining a body, but they see with equal vision that a soul is embodied for some period of time. In that period of time, if we become engrossed in the body, the mind and the senses, then it's simply a distraction and we waste our human form of life. So this verse is saying that even though this Kali Yuga is considered to be a most unfortunate time to be alive, then take advantage of this chanting of the holy name. We don't have to be troubled with long lifespan of mystic meditation with the possibility we might get it wrong and have to come back again and do it again. We don't have to be troubled with trying to do so many other things. Sometimes devotees get a little bit distracted by performing fire yajnas, and that becomes more of a focus than actually the chanting of the holy names. And we are called the Hare Krishna movement for a reason, because we chant Hare Krishna. So all these other things can be there as a service, but everything which we're doing, whether it be performing some yogas, deity worship, making garlands, growing food, distributing books, all these things are there simply to promote the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. That's what it's all about. It all has to come back to that. And whatever we're doing, it has to be with the intention to cultivate our own favourable attitude towards devotional service. So recently we were discussing from the 5th canto Srimad Bhagavatam that the test, from Chaitanya Charitamrita, the test of chanting is that we are eager for service. When one chants attentively, then one will want to do service. So in the beginning, we might not be able to do that very easily because our mind is so disturbed, and that is typical of Kali Yuga. But as we continue to chant more and more and more, Prabhupada says there's a battle going on. There's a fight between Maya and the holy name. And if we just keep chanting, then the holy name will win. Maya will always submit to Krishna, but we have to be taking shelter in Krishna. So this Prabhupada was encouraging this, that we just don't stop chanting. And Krishna says this in Bhagavad Gita, Satatam Kirtayantumam. Sat means always. So Prabhupada said we should chant minimum 16 rounds on the beats and unlimited off the beats. Therefore we should always be chanting. We cannot manufacture some kind of peace of mind without this chanting in the age of Kali. This is immunizing us against the ill effects of Kali Yuga. And we can spend so much time trying to find something else in the material world which may occupy our mind for some time. We may become distracted, or we may be hopeful this, that, next thing. But ultimately, if we accept the authority of Srila Prabhupada and the Guru Parampara, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Krishna himself, then we can understand that it's simply a waste of time trying anything else outside this chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. Now, everything else is there for either making ourselves favourable and getting a taste for chanting, or to encourage others, to invite others, to entice others to chant the holy names. So our learning, unless our learning is directed towards bringing others to chant the holy names and to devotional service, then that learning is not going to bear the proper fruits. It has to be shared, and when we do share it, whatever we learn and share it with people, then that becomes much deeper. It becomes Vijnana, it becomes realized. So I'd just like to read a few quotes, and then we can see if anyone's got any comments and questions. So a few practical things. This is from the lecture on Bhagavad Gita in September 1974. My dear Lord, and the energy of the spiritual energy of the Lord, kindly engage me in your service. That's all. I am now embarrassed with this material service. Please engage me in your service. So Srila Prabhupada has shown us here that simply we have a choice. That we can be engaged in the service of Maya, which means Godas or Godasi, the servant of the senses, servant of the mind, or we can become Krishna Das, Krishna Dasi, the servant of Krishna. So Goswami means Krishna Das. That means that our mind is controlled by the service of Krishna. So that choice we have, and as we were saying there earlier, that Prabhupada said there's a fight going on sometimes, and that fight is that when we're chanting, we're taking shelter of Krishna. And by taking shelter of Krishna, then even if there's some struggle for some time, we just don't give up. Just like if you've fallen overboard off a ship into the ocean and someone throws you one of those life belts attached to a rope, and the rope's attached to the ship. So when we grab the life belt, that is us holding on to the holy name, and that is our connection to Krishna, just like the life belt is connected to the ship through the rope. So this is our connection to Krishna. No matter what difficulty we find ourselves in, however difficult it may be, or even if we have some, not advocating it, but even if we have some terrible fall down or something like that, then never give up. Just always take back to the chanting, because there's many, Prabhupada was saying also recently in the 5th canto, that there's many stalwarts fall victim to Maya. Even great devotees can sometimes fall victim to Maya. And Prabhupada says we should not be surprised who leaves this movement, but who stays. We should not be surprised who leaves this movement, but be surprised who stays. So of course we don't want anyone to stay, but it's not up to us to judge who is on what level. But actually, the holy name, if someone's sincerely taking shelter in the holy name, then temporarily someone may appear to be like this or like that. But if they're sincerely trying to take shelter in Krishna through the holy name, then all success will come, because Krishna is Sarvamangalam, and when we chant Krishna's name, he's personally present, and in due course all auspiciousness will come. So just like when Krishna appeared, even before he was appearing, then the earth, if you read the Krishna book, the earth was, you could find jewels at the roots of trees, and so much auspiciousness was beginning to manifest on the planet. So similarly, when Krishna starts to manifest more and more in the life of the devotee means chanting Hare Krishna. Rupa Goswami says, one who chants Hare Krishna, he's a devotee. So even if you get someone who's a demon, say, this Hare Krishna is like this and like that, say, he's a devotee in the making. It's only a matter of time. In fact, in typical Scottish tradition, there was one man who was very grumpily. His friend had joined the Hare Krishna movement. In the new year, they have this tradition where they just get very drunk. And he was making a mock toast with his friends, and he said a cuss word, and he says such and such Hare Krishna. But because he chanted and he made some toast, I don't mean toast as in like under the oven, some bread, drink toast. So he wasn't long, he became a devotee also, still a devotee. So, of course, it's better that we chant favourably and not chant with offence, so we have to avoid that. So there was a few practical things here. One guest is asking Prabhupada, may I sing one bhajan? Prabhupada Prabhupada, Hare Krishna, we chant Hare Krishna. We chant Hare Krishna. It may not be melodious, but we chant Hare Krishna. There is no mention that it should be chanted lowly. So how you can say it is Gupta, confidential. It is not Gupta. Especially it is Hare Nama, not Gupta. That is, in the Kali Yuga, it should be openly chanted, and we have to follow our predecessor, Haridas Thakur Namacharya. When we chant, we utter the beach mantra. That we utter loudly, that is required, that is japa. So this mantra is Maha Mantra, and it should be chanted loudly, or as you like. There is no such restriction. And we have to follow the great personalities, Haridas Thakur. He was chanting very loudly. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu chanted very loudly, so what more evidence you want? My Guru Maharaj chanted loudly, we're chanting loudly, whole business finished. Prabhupada laughs. Is that alright? So this was in 1970. So this is the mood of the Bhakti Thakur. He's saying that the essence of all forms of religion, Sarvadharma Sar, is that one should chant the holy name loudly. Because for ourselves we can chant softly, that's fine, and for the propagation of others, then we should chant outwardly. And also sometimes our mind is so strong that we need to chant loudly to overcome the mind. Of course, if it's so loud that nobody else can hear, then that person should go out to the temple. One time there's one devotee, he had such a loud mind, very intelligent devotee, but his mind was so loud. You could hear it in the volume of his chanting, but he was trying to overcome his mind. It was so loud that nobody could hear their own japa. So then he was asked, okay, either everybody else has to leave the temple or you have to leave it. So he was chanting out in the corridor. But the thing is, it should be audibly loud so that we can hear it, because the mind is very strong, and this is the way that even if we're inattentive, at least if we're loudly chanting, the mind will become purified, and then gradually it will become attentive as well. So this is like a practical thing. And here also a letter to Radhavallabha in 1972. Concentrate fully on the sound. Chanting japa should be done early in the morning with full concentration, preferably during the Brahma Muhurta time, 1.5 hours before sunrise. Concentrate fully on the sound vibration of the mantra, pronouncing each name distinctly, and gradually your speed in chanting will increase naturally. Do not worry so much about chanting fast. Most important is the hearing. So what Prabhupada here is talking about is we should concentrate fully on the sound vibration, pronouncing each name distinctly, and gradually your speed will chant. If we're worried about we have to chant so many rounds within a certain period of time, it's like we had one devotee here many years ago. He was chanting in such a way as that you could hear he was only chanting half the mantra. And then when his guru asked him, you know, my dear disciple, you're only chanting half the mantra. He says, Guru Maharaj, it's not practical. I don't have time. And he says, well, take more time then. Because that's the most important thing, that we have to do this. Even people say there's health, health, sadhana and service. So we maintain our health and maintain our sadhana so that we can do our service. This is one aspect of it. And that service is actually chanting, first and foremost. It begins with Shravanam and Kirtanam. So chanting, the service begins with the tongue, with engaging the tongue in the service of chanting and taking prasad. And in this way, because the tongue is the most voracious and difficult to control, then we control the tongue by chanting and by taking prasad. And when that's controlled, then our service more and more is to give that same thing to other people. So therefore we maintain good health so that we can do that. And our sadhana also is there so that we can preach the holy name. Prabhupada says that in order to preach the holy name, two things we need is to know the philosophy. So therefore we must read his books, we must understand them, we must discuss these things and hear them amongst each other. This Krishna is explained in the Bhagavad Gita that devotees obtain great bliss by enlightening one another, conversing about me. So this way Krishna is saying that he's encouraging the devotees to do that, to enlighten each other. So therefore, we should attend class and we should share our realizations with other devotees, asking questions, etc. And when we have questions, then even if it's outside class, just write it down, and then when class comes again, the opportunity comes to ask, and we can do like that. So it's, so here, Prabhupada is also explaining how to chant. Krishna consciousness movement means we are teaching our disciples how to think of Krishna 24 hours. This is Krishna consciousness, and the simple method is to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So this is the process. We have got this bead bag, and within this bag there are beads. We capture each bead and chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. One bead equals 16 times, so the whole bead chain there are 108 beads. So one round means about 1700. In this way, our disciples are advised to chant at least 16 rounds. This is our daily duty. It takes about 2 hours. So Prabhupada is emphasizing the focus. He's saying we should capture the bead, and each bead we capture, we chant Hare Krishna in full mantra. So this is important, hearing and chanting. And he says, don't worry so much about speed in the beginning, but we also shouldn't use that as an excuse. I knew one devotee who he was very expert at taking a long time to chant his rounds, so he didn't have to do much service. And even I tried various means to help him. I said, okay, let's just chant in unison together. So we were chanting together, and then I got to the end of my beads and he was like halfway through it. So he was first one, he was spacing out on his finger in his beads. And then somehow or another, he was actually very determined that he would take a long time to chant his rounds, because he knew that if his rounds were finished, he'd be asked to do some service. So we shouldn't be like that. If we have to take some time to chant because we have to learn to practice chanting it attentively, that's okay. But Prabhupada says that gradually the speed will increase anyway. And Haridas Thakur, the Namacharya, wasn't chanting 300,000 names a day by going Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. He was chanting much faster. So Prabhupada said, of course, there's no hard and fast rules, but what we have to do, the hard and fast rule is whatever is favourable, we accept, and whatever is unfavourable, we reject. And sometimes we don't know what is unfavourable and what is favourable, so therefore we have to accept authority who are already further advanced along the path, and they say this is favourable, this is unfavourable, and things which are this is called Desha Kalapatra, the time, place, and circumstance, that may vary from one person to another. So if one person, say the spiritual master tells someone to chant faster and he tells someone else to chant slower, you might think, well, that sounds a bit contradictory. No, it's this one is chanting so slow and they're spacing out, they need to chant faster. And this one's chanting so slow that they're spacing out, they need to chant faster, or so fast they need to slow down and hear it. Because you can also just go, before you know it, the bead bag's on fire. There's so much friction going on there, and you get a fire extinguisher next to your bead bag because you're so fired up. And you get your 16 rounds done in half an hour, and then go and take rest. Yeah, something just happens. You were on the last, we're at the last round, right? And then we're going like this. Another one. When's this one going to finish? Finally it finishes. Like this. And fire it into the corner, see you tomorrow. So that shouldn't be that's not enthusiasm for the holy name, that's enthusiasm for something else. So of course, we may have these aspects there, and they're funny, but also it is a distraction. We're going to do it for the rest of our life, so we may as well do it right, take the time to do it right. If it takes a bit of time to get there, don't worry, we'll get there. Just like we're chanting the Guru Vastic prayers every morning, so we should learn how to pronounce it, not that 25 years later, we're still pronouncing it wrongly, or we don't know what it means. So take the time to do what we're doing when we're doing it and understand what we're doing it, its purpose. And it doesn't, if we're bored and we just nip over the top of it, we just skip over the top of it, then the taste won't come. If we just accept that the mind's bored, never mind what the mind thinks, get beyond the mind. The Maha Mantra is a deliverer of the mind, and that is our great benediction. So I just want to mention here that this chanting of the holy name, Krishna, Prabhupada says here, that bhakti is so nice that very easily you can get favour of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And if Krishna is pleased upon you, then what remains? Everything you get. Everything you get. You don't require much money, much education, nothing of the sort. Simply you require your heart. O Krishna, you are my Lord, you are my Master eternally. I am your servant eternally. Let me be engaged in your service. That is Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This is the meaning of the Hare Krishna mantra. O Krishna, O energy of Krishna, I am your servant. Somehow or other I have now fallen in this material condition. Kindly pick me up and engage me in service. Ainanda Tanuji Patitam Kinkaram Mam Vishami Bhavam Bido. That is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teaching us. Bhavam Bido, this material world is just like a great ocean. Bhava means repetition of birth and death, and Ambu means, Ambudo means in the sea, in the ocean. So we are struggling hard for existence in this ocean. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, I'm your servant, eternal. Somehow or other I've fallen in this ocean and struggling, pick me up. This is Bhakti Marg, devotion and service to become devotion and service to become very humble, meek. Always pray to Krishna, kindly consider me as one of the particles of the dust of your lotus feet. So this is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who's Krishna himself, is showing us this mood. He's saying this is how to be the devotee. And simply he was going around everywhere in a humble state of mind, requesting everyone, kindly please chant this holy name, going barefoot throughout all of India. So how much more the Lord has to do to convince us? He's walking all over the place for years, 6 years he travelled barefoot all over India, asking everyone to chant. How much more he has to do to convince us that to convince us that he's more keen for us to come back than we are to stay, or that we are to go back. We're keen to stay here in the material world. We find all sorts of philosophies, and therefore we have universities with philosophies of how we should stay in the material world. But thankfully the devotees are also creating educational institutions where they're saying, no, get out of this material world, you don't belong here. And so this is also a very important point here I'd like to bring up is, when a mantra is chanted by a great devotee, the mantra becomes more powerful. Although the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is powerful in itself, the disciple upon initiation receives the mantra from the spiritual master. For when the mantra is chanted by the spiritual master, it becomes more powerful. So everyone should chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and if they're greatly fortunate to hear it from the pure devotee, just like Prabhupada says, that milk touched by the lips of a serpent should be avoided. And one should hear from the lips of a pure devotee. So Prabhupada himself couldn't come in and say, I'm that pure devotee, so you should hear from me, but simultaneously he's having to teach and be that at the same time. So we see the Evam Parampara Praptam, this disciplic succession. Prabhupada has shown us that this is the bona fide connection from Krishna all the way down to the present day. So we have this great fortune of the Guru Parampara directly connecting us with Krishna. And when the spiritual master gives you that holy name, then you have that connection to Krishna even stronger. Connection is there already through the Maha Mantra, but when the spiritual master gives it to you, then it's official that you're now a devotee. When you take your vows, When you accept your spiritual master, then it's official. You say, Krishna, I'm yours. Engage me as you see fit. Direct me as you see fit. And here another one is the spiritual master delivers a disciple from the clutches of Maya by initiating him into the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. In this way, a sleeping human being can revive his consciousness by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. In other words, the spirit master awakens the sleeping living entity to his original consciousness so that he can worship Lord Vishnu. This is the purpose of Diksha or initiation. Initiation means receiving the pure knowledge of spiritual consciousness. And I can share with you that when I got first initiation, the very next day I was chanting japa. I felt like a great burden had been lifted from me, and my ability to chant and hear was actually noticeably improved, even though I'd been chanting some time before. And they say that this is likened to preparing the field before putting the seed in. If you spend a lot of time preparing the field nicely, then when the seed goes in, then it'll grow nicely. So don't think that I'm not initiated, so it doesn't really matter until I'm initiated. You know, initiated means beginning. It doesn't mean that you've just achieved it and now you can relax. It means that we actually were just beginning. Someone's accepted, okay, I'll take responsibility to guide you back to Krishna. Now let's start the journey. Beforehand, we're just showing that we're serious about wanting to take the journey. So sometimes, like even if you want to go on some kind of expedition, first of all, you have to get to the meeting point and sign up for it. So that's what we're doing. Preparation before initiation is like that. And then we start the expedition under the able guidance of some kind of guide, some Sherpa or someone who knows the way. So not only is the chanter of the Maha Mantra purified, but the heart of anyone who happens to hear the transcendental vibration of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, is also cleansed. Even the souls embodied in lower animals, insects, trees, and other species of life also become purified and prepared to become fully Krishna conscious simply by hearing the transcendental vibration. This was explained by Thakur Haridas when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu inquired from him how living entities lower than human beings can be delivered from material bondage. So this is a very important point also, that even if we're out in the garden and we chant, then all those plants, they're getting liberated. In Prabhupada is here, that even the souls embodied in lower animals, insects, trees, and other species of life also become purified and prepared to become fully Krishna conscious. So that means they're getting prepared for another birth where they can get full advantage of taking to the process of Krishna consciousness. So therefore this Sankirtan movement is a prime benediction for humanity at large, but not just humanity, but for all living beings, moving, non-moving living beings. So in this way, there's nothing to compare with Krishna consciousness, because Krishna consciousness is not just equal opportunities for gender, or for races, or for ethnicities. It's for all species of life, equal opportunities for all jivas. This is our message. So this is actually proper compassion. So, and this is the mood that Lord Chaitanya had when he was chanting. He was on foot, as we mentioned earlier. He was chanting, and he passed, everywhere he went he was chanting, and he passed through this Jayakanda forest. And because he is the Supreme Lord, and because he's experiencing Mahabhav, then any living entities, they give up their enmity. The tiger and the deer were dancing and chanting together. So we might think, oh, this is a bit exaggeration, but don't make such an offence. The glories of the holy name are not exaggeration. Just like not so long ago, Raghunath, Ian and myself, we had caught a rat in a cage, and it was jumping all over the place, squealing. It was very fearful. And we said, let's just chant, and we started chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Didn't even get through half the mantra, and the thing had just calmed down. It was peaceful. And Prabhupada also, his disciple was cleaning his room, and she said, well, Prabhupada, it's an insect, what shall I do? And Prabhupada says, chant to it. So this is the compassion of the devotee, that he sees the living entity everywhere. He sees the devotee, there's a devotee, fallen servant of Krishna. Let me try to reunite him with Krishna. This is the mood of a devotee. He's always thinking like that. And if we have to inadvertently, sometimes we might stand on an insect or something like that, and we feel terrible for it. We don't feel good about it. We don't just switch off to it. But living in the material world, it's not possible to live in such a way that we don't harm some living entity, but we do nati hamsa, which means the minimal violence. But at least as much as we're aware, then we do that. So I know class is running a little bit long, but these are some important points I'd like to make in just a few minutes with questions if there's any. So this is the most important principle of Krishna consciousness is always
To propagate the holy name.
Yeah, so that's our first duty. So we ask the principles of Krishna consciousness, which is the most important. Sometimes people say no meat eating, no gambling, or illicit sex, intoxication. But above and beyond that, and before that, so what is the most important principle?
Enthusiasm.
That is, Prabhupada says that the whole movement was based on enthusiasm. Without this utsaha, enthusiasm, the movement would not exist. So that's also important. Anybody? But there's one specific thing we're looking for, that we should always do something and never do something. So always think of Krishna, never forgetting. So Krishna is the origin of Lord Vishnu. He should always be remembered and never forgotten any time. All the rules and prohibitions mentioned in the Shastras should be the servants of these two principles. So this is the main thing. And one should must strictly chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra 24 hours daily. So Maya doesn't think, okay, devotee's resting now, I'll take a little nap. Or devotee's having a space out, I'll just leave him to have the space out, and come back later when he's finished. Maya's not like that. Maya is present in the material world always. And therefore, to immunize ourselves against Maya, then we always have to endeavour to remember Krishna. Of course, that means realizing that even in our service, that is to remind us of Krishna, remind us why we're doing it. Not that we can't do our service because we're too busy chanting. Like, I can't shoot this door because it's distracting me from my chanting. The purpose, what we're doing it for, is service. To do it in a humble state of mind. So Prabhupada says at least we should chant 16 rounds. And it's encouraged that we should chant more. If we can't find time to get beads out and chant more, then at least just chant whatever you're doing, just chant along with it. So this is an interesting one. I do not know just what has happened to your old beads, but you should keep your beads always very, very carefully. They are your direct link with Krishna. Prabhupada mentions also that to chant the holy name always one should be humbler than the grass in the street and devoid of all desire for personal honour, but one should offer others all respectful obeisances. A devotee engaged in chanting the holy name of the Lord should practice forbearance like that of a tree. Even if rebuked or chastised, he should not say anything to others to retaliate. Even if a tree is cut, it never protests. And if it is drying up and dying, it does not ask anyone for water. So we have to be more tolerant than the tree, because the tree cannot ask. Maybe it would if it had the chance. So we have to be more tolerant than the tree, which means that we could ask, but we choose not to. And we could retaliate, we could create some trouble, but we choose not to. So In short, there's nothing more worthwhile to do with the human form of life than chant the Hare Krishna mantra. And to give it to others, Lord Chaitanya exemplified that himself, and this is how we get Lord Chaitanya's mercy. Simultaneously, we have to endeavour ourselves. God helps those who help themselves. So if we make a great endeavour to always try to be Krishna conscious and give it to others, then certainly the mercy of Lord Chaitanya will come to us. Any questions? Peter?
What is so especially hypocritical in Kali Yuga, and how could the people in Satya Yuga overcome hypocrisy?
Because the living entities in those days had fewer bad qualities, for one thing, and the population wasn't as it is just now. Population is a big population. So people aren't meant to be crammed up in cities like they are just now. There's an old saying that man made the city and God made the country. So people are meant to live in a more simple way of life. That Prabhupada says that to solve all economical problems, and give everyone an acre of land and a cow. But then that means that these people who want to have much more and much more, then they can't have much more and much more if everyone's got an acre of land and a cow. So even as it stands just now with the population as it is in the world, it still could be much conducive for a sustainable way of life. And even in this age, there is a golden age in the middle of Kali Yuga, which is what we're in just now. Just like we were saying, the Prabhupada said that typically, due to all the sinful activities that people are performing, then the sinful reaction, the global sinful reaction, should be much worse. But because of the chanting of the holy name and the devotees' sacrifices, then this is keeping back the tide of Kali Yuga. And because the people were more advanced then, they were more saintly, then they were not inclined to. But there's always, in the material world, there's always two classes of people, divine and demoniac. So it's not that absolutely everybody all the time is just pure, because there's always demons who want to take advantage of situations. But predominantly, it was much more conducive, and there was less sinful living entities, more living entities who are more saintly. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Anything else?
People are not like the pandemic and so on, it's not going how we think poverty and hunger should be there, so how do we, what's our response
I think what's right.
to hunger and poverty?
What about it?
So people are striving to reduce it, get rid of it, so the social implications that structure you there that just keep preventing it and something. So what's our response to that?
Yeah, so we're trying to patch up something externally. Just like if you have some kind of skin disease, you may put something on it. But if the blood is impure that's causing that skin disease, you have to purify the blood. Otherwise, you may deal with the symptom, but it will just come up somewhere else and somewhere else. So what they're trying to do is deal with the symptom. The symptom is that people are suffering, for basically because of all suffering is ignorance. So ignorance that may manifest in a number of different ways. One is that people are doing sinful activities and they don't know that they're going to have to suffer for that. Or people are being greedy and monopolizing the resources of material nature and ignoring the needs of others. It can be like that. So they say there's enough for everyone's needs, but not enough for greed. For the greed. And when we see that there's mountains of food, sometimes more wealthy countries, they stock food, they stockpile it, so much so that they practically have to give it away or empty it into the sea or destroy it. Meanwhile, people are suffering because they can't get something to drink or they can't get something to eat. And there's absolutely no reason why, if the world was to work together, they couldn't bring water and food to everybody. But because people who are in a more materially opulent situation want to continue to enjoy it, even at the expense of other suffering, then that will go on. So until the heart's purified, then that will continue to go on and go on. I remember since even primary one in school, they were doing collections for starving children in Africa. A teacher had a little tobacco tin, and the kids would be asked to bring in pennies from home, and they go into starving children in Africa, India. So that was going on, back in the 60s and the 70s, and it's still going on. And so how the ordinary person on the street could come up with a solution for it, but people who are in the know don't come up with a solution for it, so it means that they don't want a solution. But the chanting of the holy name, if we can encourage people to chant, then the good qualities will come, and then as they become more purified. So even these people who are looking for a solution to poverty and to shortages of food, if somehow or another we can engage them to chant, first thing is they might not even be willing to do that, so then we can give them prasadam. We can invite them to some function with some chanting going on, just like we've been doing so much food distribution during the COVID situation. And we invited all our partners to, when the time is right, when the time is safe, that we can meet together and give everyone a feast. And of course we'll have Kirtan there. So we're taking the opportunity to try to cultivate them. And in this way, so it's gradual purification. And then, of course, a lot of these people who are following various other religious organizations, they wouldn't have much problem seeing that. But the people who have the power to do something about it, that's going to take some time. But the more people who get on board with that, and the more people who take to the chanting, then only if people take to chant Hare Krishna, when the hearts become purified, will they see giving up the selfishness and distributing everything to the needy as possible. Is that okay? Anyone got anything else you'd like to add?
I've heard from different devotees that it can be a gradual process to go back to the spiritual world. But like there's a planet where Krishna is somewhere in the material universe. It's obviously spiritual, but it's also in the material universe. So in the verse before, it's saying that one can be promoted to the kingdom, the transcendental kingdom of God, simply by chanting Hare Krishna. So I was wondering how much we can have faith in that verse and the mercy of the holy name. If you can shed some light on that.
Yeah, because it's in Srimad Bhagavatam, we can have full faith, and because we trust Prabhupada, he wouldn't translate it if it wasn't true. So we can have full faith, and in connection with, if we are unsuccessful in completing it, and we may go to a place where Krishna is having his pastimes in the material world and then go back to Godhead, that's also in Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Prabhupada says that one can get trained under the guidance of a pure devotee. So we're actually already being trained under the guidance of a pure devotee. So maybe this is the place where Krishna is performing his pastimes, because this Sankirtan Yoga, the Sankirtan movement, is Krishna's pastimes.
Yes.
That is the Lord's pastimes. If we see it like that, and we take the instructions, it's all about really taking the instructions to heart and putting them into practice, and accepting that training. And if we're sincere about it, Prabhupada says, if we dedicate our life to this Sankirtan movement, even if you have some difficulty remembering Krishna at the time of death, I'll get you in the back door. On another occasion, he said that if you dedicate your life to the Sankirtan movement, if you have trouble remembering Lord Chaitanya at the time of death, he'll remember you and he'll forces you into your mind. He'll be there for you. So the Lord's not like, you spaced out at the last minute, too bad, back you come, back for another birth. He's not like that, he's a person. You're just like, you would feel compassionate to someone who's trying, wouldn't you? What to speak of the Lord, who is supremely compassionate. But at the same time, we can't do a half-hearted attempt and think, okay, I'll just do that and then hopefully that will do. that's not going to cut it. We have to be sincere. We have to be eager for Krishna's mercy, eager for Krishna's association. And therefore this Trinada Pisa Nachana Tarora Pisa Hisnana Amanina Manadena Kirtnias Dahari is one of the most foundational guiding instructions of a devotee. And there's no worse reaction that a devotee can receive than to lose the taste of chanting Holy Name. How can we progress beyond that? So, in order to avoid losing the taste, then we have to work towards gaining a taste, which means developing a humble state of mind and seeing the good in others, avoiding the 10 offences. You know, when someone gives us some direction, don't snap back at them and take the risk of Vaishnava Aparant. We think, okay, obviously there's something here I'm not seeing. And if there's something else, even if the devotee is maybe not delivering the instruction in the most palatable way, that may be something the person has to learn. But at least for us, if we are eager to learn, then that will come. So, okay, anything else from the books?
I like to listen to this. I've been saying this verse every morning, Trinada Pisa Nachana, or talking to the train, and I'd never realised. I just thought it was one of these impossible things that you say, and no one's ever going to be able to do that. But then it makes sense. So that then reflecting on that, more humble in the straw on the street as well, because the straw on the street can't do anything, and the tree can't do anything. So if you do that, and then I like the link here at the end as well. The main threat to our chanting is the offence, and if you're being proactively humble and tolerant, you'll safeguard yourself against making any offences towards anybody else, which will keep your enthusiasm to chant intact.
It's in our camp that humility is tested every day. Sometimes we just don't even know it, because sometimes we're just not rising to the test. An example, once I was at Govardhan Hill, and I seen one who looked like perhaps a Gaudiya Bengali devotee, and he was doing Dandavat Parikrama around Govardhan, so he was actually doing it through the town of Govardhan. Part of the way as you're going around Govardhan Hill, you come to the town Govardhan, and so this devotee, he was paying his Dandavats in the middle of a busy street. So the Dandavat means that wherever your hand finishes when you pay your full obeisances, that's where your feet start to do the next one. And we do that all the way around Govardhan, and it takes quite a considerable amount of time. And it just so happens that there was a cow walking along that stood on his back. Now, cows are quite heavy. And if that had been one of us, anyway, if it had been me, I'd have been, what the heck's this? Here I am, coming all the way to India, paying my Dandavats, and this is what you get, I'm out of here, forget it. We could have been like that. I don't know how I would have reacted myself, but we're seeing how this devotee reacted, that he wasn't disturbed. He actually was disturbed, and he was disturbed that he was in the way of the cow. He was thinking, I'm so sinful that I have to perform Dandavat Parikram. You could see just in his mood, I never heard what he said, but you could see there was genuine humility. He got up and he went to the cow, and he was trying to touch the cow's feet, and he was thinking he shouldn't have been there. This is the Lord's cow in the Lord's holy dam, and I'm just in the way of this cow. I could have tripped it up. Not like, oh, my back, I need to take 3 weeks in bed now. Immediately gets up, and in his injured condition he still continues. That's genuine humility. Even though there was very great cause for disturbance, he wasn't disturbed. His only disturbance was he felt that he was a disturbance. So that's what we have to cultivate. And we get ample opportunity every day if we see it. Like someone says something in our heart, even though externally we might think, okay, I managed to accept that there without mouthing off. But in our heart we might not be too happy about it. But if we're looking to be humble and looking to show respect to others without looking for respect for ourselves, we'll see it actually every single day in life. We get opportunities, many opportunities. And that means every day you're looking forward to your japa the next day, because when you're looking forward to the day ahead, thinking, will I get another opportunity to try to practice being humble? Maybe I'll get it right this time. So it's a practice, not just like we keep chanting and magically it will just happen, and nothing will affect us. But actually, we have to make an endeavour. And then it just becomes more deep and more rich, and that affects everything that we do.
It's sweet that with the affinity, he feels he needs to be a little bit away from the association with devotees because one or two were provoking things in him. But at the same time, he was realizing that he thought he got free from these things and they'd gone away forever. And so, in another sense, his devotees did him a favor because it was letting him see that he's still there. It's called a core need when you have a bruised knee, someone brushes past you, overreact. Somebody that didn't have a sore knee would react the same way. So the fact that he reacted like that, but other people in the community went up on it with the way this person was, showed that the problem was really with him, you know.
That's a very good point. So, yeah, basically what we're saying is that the devotee felt that because he was being disturbed, then he should stay further away from the devotees. But one of the first instructions Krishna gives, Bhagavad Gita 2.14, Matra Sparshasta Kantaya, Shitoshna Sukadukada, Adamapaya Nonachastam Stitikshashu Bharata, that one should learn to be tolerant, and we should learn to be to see, just like the winter and summer seasons come and go, we should be steady in happiness and distress and learn to tolerate without being disturbed. So if someone is causing us to be disturbed, that means they're reminding us that we haven't learned to tolerate without being disturbed. We still have to practice that. So rather than seeing the devotee who you think brought it out as being the challenging element or the enemy or the cause of it, see the fact that we have not learned that lesson yet as being the challenge. There was one occasion, perhaps I did it on a number of occasions, but one occasion particularly, Hari Sori Prabhu was on a flight with Srila Prabhupada. And in those days, people were allowed to smoke on the airplane, and they had these big long kind of bench seats as well. It was quite an interesting situation in those days. And they had smoking and non-smoking sections of the airplane. And the devotees had booked Srila Prabhupada into a non-smoking part of the airplane specifically, but these boisterous drunk guys were in the non-smoking area also, and they were smoking. And Hari Sori Prabhu says, I want to complain about this, can I complain? And Prabhu says, if you cannot tolerate it, then you're no better than them. And he was thinking he wanted to complain on behalf of the inconvenience his spiritual master would be experiencing, but Prabhupada showed you, I'm not inconvenienced, I'm not bothered. Obviously, you must be bothered, otherwise you're no better than them. So this is the challenge we all face every day, and we shouldn't be purposely trying to test people. That would be a bit demoniac. Tests will come of their own accord. It's not up to us to say, okay, I'm going to lay a trap for this devotee and see how they react, and then say, I see you're disturbed. That wouldn't be devotional. The tests will come anyway, we don't have to look for them. And the more we try to learn to overcome these things, it's difficult in the beginning because we hold on to our false ego or conception of who we think we are. But the more we learn these tests, then the more realizable it becomes. And just like Haridas Thakur, when he was being whipped in all those marketplaces, he wasn't actually experiencing the pain. Out of genuine humility, when he's seen these Muslim officers who were beating him in the marketplaces when they were so frustrated that he wouldn't die, and they were fearful because they were going to get punished. And he said, what's wrong? And he says, we got punished because we were told to beat you in these marketplaces until we died. He said, why didn't you just say, just throw my body in the river? And he was apologetic that he'd caused so much fear for them. So that's kind of humility we cannot imitate. Let's just learn the ABC first. Okay, we should stop learning first, okay? So thanks everyone for your attention, and this week we'll more focus on all aspects of chanting. So let's take advantage of this and make some quantum leap, or at least make some incremental improvements in our chanting and our attitude towards chanting and everything which emanates from that. It's going to be the key. Shri Koditama Prashashiki, Vinam Ki, Tiger Premande,
Haribo, His Graceful Prabhupada Prabhu ki.
Lord Bhaktivinoda. So I don't ask if there's any questions online with that.
Just a comment from Mary saying that